What's going on, y'all? Joshua 1 through 14. Let's get into it. Moses is dead. We start big events, the big stuff, as Joshua going into the armies, going into fight, going into war. And God is telling Joshua, don't be afraid. Be encouraged, be uplifted. You're gonna get through this. Officially start to cross the border into Canaan, into the promised land, and it's suspense, it's action, it's all this craziness, right? The spies are being sent out. They're seeing the walls of Jericho. They're seeing all these things. Enemies are falling left and right. God is splitting up little lakes and bodies of water. He's doing all the same things that he did with Moses now, but with Joshua. That's really symbolic. That's really important that we see that what God was doing with one person, he continues to do it on another. When God said, Moses, follow me, with Joshua, he says, wherever you go, I will go with you. Really important thing, really fun thing to look and observe at. So let's continue. There's so much to say about the story of Jericho, but we're just going to focus on one person that is really special, that's really important in all this, and it's Rahab. Rahab was this woman that was obviously on the outer parts of the city. She wouldn't have been considered anybody of importance. She's just a random prostitute. She was known. She loved her family. Hides these spies. The interesting thing about Rahab is that what she says, well, you remember, she's not an Israelite by any means. She's not related to them in any capacity. But what we see with Rahab is that she says, I've heard of you guys, and the Lord your God is the God of heaven and above, of the earth below, and everything between, right? She is acknowledging with her mouth, I believe in the God that you guys believe. She asks them like, hey, spare me and my family, right? Everyone that's in my house, spare us. They give her a scarlet cord. And that scarlet cord signifies that whenever we see that cord, everyone inside of this house will be set apart and will be saved and will be protected. Don't worry about it. We got you. What did that cord mean? What did it represent? Faith, protection, redemption, God's mercy. How do we know that? Because colors have meaning. They have meaning in the Bible, and that's something we'll talk about maybe in the future. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a Bible study all about biblical colors and why the colors mean what they mean. But later on, Rahab later becomes Jesus's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma, or Jesus's grandmother in his lineage. How do we know that? In Matthew chapter 1, when you're reading through the genealogy of Jesus, basically all of Jesus's family tree and how Jesus can be who he is, in Matthew 1:5, it actually says her name, and it says that she gave birth to Boaz, and we're going to read who that guy is later. Another cool thing we see about Rahab, and the last thing I'll say about Rahab, is Rahab represents you and I, the Gentile believers, the people that weren't Hebrews, that weren't Jewish, that weren't from the lineage of the Israelites. We are those people that when we see the Christ, when we see God's people, when we see God, I want to be a part of that. And God adopts us. He takes us out of the sin, takes us out of the nonsense, and he embraces us and he covers us and he lets us live in his goodness. And how do we see that? We see that through faith. Ooh, Alex, this is saying a whole bunch of nonsense. Hebrews 11:31 makes it abundantly clear that through faith, that's how Rahab got to where she was. In chapter 5, after Israel crosses over into the promised land, the manna stops. Israel starts eating from the land of Canaan. Remember, the manna was there to get them out of the desert, that they didn't have to worry about not having bread to eat or having the food for their consumption. It was to help them through the wilderness so they can get to the point where they needed to get to. God will provide differently in different seasons of your life. But there are some things that are just temporary tools to get you to growth. You gotta continue to press into God, because God used the manna to get them to the promised land so that they could mature and transition into the next phase of their journey. Another cool thing that we see is when Joshua is getting ready to go to battle, that there's this guy with the sword drawn, and Joshua comes out there because Joshua's a reckless man. He's like, are you for us or against us? And this guy legit was like, neither. I'm a commander of the army of the Lord. What? Joshua falls to the floor in worship, and he declares that ground is holy. The debate is if this was either the archangel Michael or if it was Jesus. I believe it was Jesus. There is no substantial proof that this would have been Michael, because Joshua worshiped him. This man accepted the worship. He spoke out of the authority of God, and it also reminds us to the similarities of what happened with Moses in the burning bush. Something to think about. Chapters 10 and 11 is another set of chapters that is highly debated. The debate isn't if the battles happen. How did it happen? Joshua leads these major battles against the Canaanites and through all the other people, and they describe this crazy amount of victories that we see later on in Joshua and in Judges, and show how many of the enemies actually were still in the area and they still needed to be conquered. So the way that these chapters read, it's almost like a direct layout, but it's really not. You can either look at it as this is the order it happened and how it happened and this is everything that happened, or a theological approach of it, like, hey, this is all the things that happened and we're just recapping the bits and pieces here, or you can take it as literal. There's a lot of debate there, there's a lot of give, a lot of take, but the biggest reason why there's debate in this is because one of the greatest miracles that the scripture professes to have happened occurs in Joshua, and that's when he tells the sun to stand still. This is debated heavily because there is no astrological proof. That means like NASA and people that study astrophysics and things of that nature, that they can't see a plausibility. They can't see it in the Earth's history. They can't see it in the history of space of something like this happening. Now, there was a theory that was very popular that there was proof that there is time missing from timeline of our creation, our creative universe, and that they had deduced that down to Joshua's event. It would have been about 3 hours, which would have fit perfectly with the scripture. But that was a theory, and later on, it was one of those things where it's like, it was kind of like there's just not enough to substantiate that theory, so we're just not going to go with it. I stand that what we see in Joshua 10 and 11 is a recap of the events, and then it's further expounded on later. Geographical, historical proofs that we can see and debate on, but reality is it just comes down to how you interpret these chapters. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.